Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Lucas Davenport broke ground on his dream garage, he expected dust, not war. But a forged map, a power-hungry HOA president, and a midnight sabotage turned blueprints into battlegrounds. This isn't just a neighbor dispute, it's a fight for freedom, one shotgun shell at a time. My name is Lucas Davenport. I'm 45 years old, an architect by trade, and a man who believes in precision, whether it's in blueprints or in how I live my life. A few months ago, after 2 decades of grinding through city projects and corporate clients, I finally bought myself some peace, a 3-acre parcel on the edge of a quiet residential zone outside of town. The land was clean, the title was clear, and most importantly, it was not under the control of any homeowners association. The property had everything I wanted. A charming 2-story farmhouse, old oak trees lining the driveway, and just enough open space to finally build something for myself instead of someone else. I had a vision, a detached garage with vaulted ceilings and reinforced concrete flooring, perfect for restoring vintage cars. My longtime obsession. I had 3 old beauties collecting dust in storage, including a '67 Mustang Fastback I'd been itching to bring back to life. I went by the book, like I always do. Pulled the zoning maps, filed the plans with the county, secured my building permits, and hired a licensed crew I'd worked with before. Everything was squared away. The county signed off. The trucks rolled in. We broke ground. I finally felt like I was creating something that was mine. That's when I saw her for the first time. Standing just outside the hedgerow near the edge of my property line, arms crossed, wearing a sharp navy blouse and a permanent frown, was a woman watching the excavation like she owned the damn earth. I gave a polite nod from the driveway. She didn't nod back. She didn't even blink. I didn't think much of it then. People get curious when construction starts, and I figured she was just another neighbor intrigued by the sound of jackhammers and rebar. Turns out, I'd just made the radar of Marilyn Drake, president of the Red Hills HOA. I had no idea who she was at the time. I just knew something about her stare put me on edge. It wasn't nosiness, it was inspection, as if she were measuring my property for the kind of punishment she thought I deserved. And when I walked back to the house that afternoon, my boots still caked with concrete dust, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this woman was planning, it wasn't going to end with a simple neighborly complaint. 3 days after we laid the foundation, I found a thick envelope tucked under my front door. No postage, just my name printed in all caps, black ink, aggressive handwriting. Inside were 6 sheets of paper, crisp, smug, and reeking of bad faith. The letterhead read Red Hills HOA. I didn't need to finish the first sentence to know who it came from. Mr. Davenport, it began. We regret to inform you that the ongoing structure at 47 Bay Ridge Lane constitutes a severe violation of the Red Hills Aesthetic Zoning Guidelines. You are hereby notified that daily fines of $10,000 will be imposed effective immediately unless construction ceases. I laughed at first, short, confused, the kind of laugh you give when your brain hasn't caught up with your outrage. I wasn't part of Red Hills. My deed, title, and county filings were ironclad. My property was not now, nor had it ever been, subject to any HOA jurisdiction. Yet here it was, a formal demand trying to muscle me into submission. They attached a hand-marked map that had mysteriously expanded the HOA boundaries to conveniently include my land. There was also a meeting transcript dated 6 weeks earlier, a supposed vote where Lucas Davenport had been unanimously welcomed into the HOA family. I hadn't even moved in 6 weeks ago, and my signature, a jittery imitation clearly forged, like someone had tried copying it from a blurry scan. The kicker was the final paragraph, a veiled threat barely pretending to be civil. We hope you choose to cooperate. Otherwise, legal action will be pursued, and we will not hesitate to notify the local authorities. That night, I sat at my kitchen table going over the documents again, a bottle of rye untouched beside me, phone pressed to my ear. My attorney Cliff didn't need long to confirm what I suspected. This is extortion, he said flatly. They're not just bluffing, they're committing fraud. But you need to treat this like a declaration of war. She wants something from you, Lucas. Control. And if you don't push back hard, she'll take it. So I pushed. I installed a perimeter of high-res security cameras. I mounted private property and no trespassing signs along the tree line. I filed an official letter with the county, reaffirming that my land was not, under any legal circumstance, part of Red Hills. I wasn't just defending a garage. I was defending the principle that when you own land in America, it's yours. And nobody, especially not a clipboard queen like Marilyn Drake, gets to rewrite that with a ballpoint pen. It was barely 8 a.m. when the knock came. Firm, practiced, authoritative. I opened the front door to find two uniformed officers standing on my porch, one thumbing a notepad, the other scanning the property behind me. The older one spoke first. "Mr. Davenport?" I nodded, already feeling my jaw tighten. "We received a report of an unauthorized structure being built on protected community land. Are you aware of any construction taking place?" I exhaled slowly. "Gentlemen, yes, I'm building a garage. On my land. I have all the permits. County approved, nothing unauthorized about it." The younger officer's brow furrowed as he flipped through a printout. According to the HOA representative, this address falls within the Red Hills jurisdiction. She claims the construction violates Section 4.7 of their bylaws, non-conforming exterior structures. "She," I said, "must be Marilyn Drake." They glanced at each other. The name rang familiar. I invited them in. In my home office, I laid out everything. My property deed, parcel number, legal description, county zoning exemption, signed permits, inspection clearance. I even pulled up a GIS map on my desktop showing the exact boundaries of Red Hills, ending a full 80 yards short of my southern fence line. The older cop ran a hand over his chin, visibly annoyed. "This looks in order. Can't argue with the GIS coordinates." The younger one looked genuinely embarrassed. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Davenport. We're required to follow up when reports come in, even if it's a misunderstanding." I let out a quiet breath. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a stunt. As they left, I stood at the top of my driveway watching their cruiser roll off, and that's when I saw her. Marilyn, sitting in a champagne-colored Mercedes at the far end of the road. Windows up, sunglasses on, not a hint of shame. She didn't drive away until the cops were out of sight. I went back inside, took out a notepad, and wrote down everything. Date, time, names, badge numbers. I wasn't going to let this slide into just another neighbor dispute. I knew the game now. Marilyn was testing the system, seeing how far she could push the lie before someone called it what it was. But that wasn't the end of her surveillance. The next day, a small drone buzzed over the garage site, hovering, circling, tilting its camera toward my crew. One of my guys, Mason, a former Army mechanic, gave me a look. "You want me to bring it down?" I shook my head and went inside. 2 minutes later, I stepped out with my 12-gauge over-under, raised it once. One clean shot. The drone tumbled into the grass like a dead moth. I found the camera intact. The memory card was still warm. It was full of footage. My land, my workers, my signs. A silent attempt to build a case. Or maybe just to intimidate. Either way, I wasn't about to let someone spy on me and call it community oversight. This was no longer HOA posturing. This was a full-scale siege. The storm started just past midnight, not in the sky. The weather was calm, moonlit, eerily quiet, but in the headlights that crept up my driveway with their beams off. I was already awake, nursing coffee at my workbench in the garage's unfinished frame. Something had been crawling under my skin all day, a prickling instinct I couldn't shake. And when the cameras pinged my phone with motion alerts near the western fence line, I knew that instinct was right. 3 men, hooded, moving fast and low, like they'd done this before. One carried a crowbar, another had a spray can in each hand. The third, bigger, with broad shoulders, swung what looked like a sledgehammer as he trotted through my open framework. They weren't just there to intimidate, they were there to destroy. I moved like a switch had flipped. No hesitation. I grabbed the over-under from its wall mount and crossed the yard, silent through the gravel path. I didn't shout. I didn't warn. I waited until I was 20 feet from them, hidden by the frame of the structure, watching them tear into weeks of labor. The one with the crowbar pried at a support beam, while the spray cans hissed vulgar red graffiti across the plywood. "Stop building, join or leave." That's when I stepped out. The sound of the shotgun's pump echoed like thunder through the bones of the garage. "Drop the tools, hands up, now!" They froze. One of the smaller guys bolted instantly, sprinting toward the hedgerow. The other hesitated, dropped the cans, and raised his hands. But the big guy, he turned. Slowly, and lifted the sledgehammer halfway, like he was thinking about testing me. Wrong move. I fired a single blast into the ground at his feet, a dirt-splitting boom that sent gravel flying and his hammer clattering to the concrete. He stumbled, cursed, but still didn't run. He glared at me like he knew who I was. Like I wasn't just some guy defending a garage. I was the enemy of someone who paid him. And then he lunged. Not fast, but reckless. I stepped back, steadied, and fired again. The shot caught him square in the thigh, sending him crashing backward into a heap of plywood and plastic tarping. The last man screamed and took off into the dark. Within minutes, I'd called 911. The sirens wailed louder than I thought possible in this part of the county. By the time the EMTs arrived, the big man was conscious and screaming, clutching a thigh soaked in blood. As they loaded him into the ambulance, I caught a flash of something on his vest, a patch. Red Hills HOA. The responding officers didn't even blink when I explained what happened. One of them, a grizzled sergeant who looked like he'd seen more meth barns than HOA meetings, muttered, "You did what you had to. Cameras caught it all?" "All of it," I said, handing him a drive. The sheriff's deputy stayed behind to take the statement. As we stood near the mess of shattered beams and red slurs, he asked, "You think this was a warning?" I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the man's dropped vest, at the patch barely stitched onto nylon. "No," I said finally, "this wasn't a warning. This was a message." And now it was my turn to send one back. I didn't wait for them to make the next move. The morning after the break-in, my lawyer Cliff filed a civil suit against the Red Hills HOA and Marilyn Drake personally. The charges were stacked like firewood: conspiracy to commit property sabotage, falsification of legal documents, harassment, attempted coercion, and criminal trespass. We filed for an emergency injunction to block any further interference from the HOA while law enforcement investigated the attack. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to momentum. Marilyn stayed silent publicly, but her silence didn't stop the whispers. A week later, we got wind that she'd lawyered up with an aggressive HOA defense firm out of state, the kind that specialized in property control litigation, a polite way of saying they were bullies in suits. But Cliff wasn't fazed. "They'll posture," he said. "That's all they've got. They don't want this going to court because if it does, their skeletons come out." And come out they did. Discovery started slow. We subpoenaed HOA board communications, budget records, internal memos. And then we struck gold. Emails from Marilyn to the board outlining a plan to expand community boundaries proactively before parcels are legally annexed. One of them even included a diagram, hand-drawn, scanned, and annotated, showing my property marked with the words, "Target lot. Proceed with pressure campaign." But it got worse. A whistleblower emerged, a former treasurer for the Red Hills HOA. Her name was Dana, and she'd resigned 2 months before the incident. She came forward after hearing about the attack. In a sworn deposition, she detailed how Marilyn had diverted thousands in HOA funds to pay consultants, unlicensed contractors, and security personnel with no actual background checks. The same types who showed up in my yard that night with crowbars and spray paint. Dana also turned over a spreadsheet hidden from public reports where HOA funds had been transferred to a shell account linked to a private debit card, purchases, spas, hotel stays, designer handbags, and a single $600 payment labeled fence removal discretionary. By the time the pretrial hearing came around, we had over 200 pages of evidence. Marilyn arrived with her legal team looking calm on the surface, but I saw it in her eyes. That flicker of panic, that knowledge that her empire built on intimidation and backroom deals was cracking at the seams. In court, Cliff walked the judge through our timeline: the fake HOA vote, the forged signature, the falsified jurisdiction maps, the droned surveillance, the police visit, and the armed sabotage. The judge, a no-nonsense type from the county bench, paused when Cliff played the security footage of the masked men storming my property. He rewound it 3 times, said nothing. Then he leaned forward and asked one question. Was the HOA president aware this attack might occur? Cliff smiled without showing teeth. "Your Honor, we'll let the next round of testimony answer that, because what we were about to reveal would drag the Queen of Red Hills into the mud she'd been flinging for years, and she had no idea who was ready to talk next." The first voice recording landed in Cliff's inbox on a Tuesday morning. Anonymous return address, unmarked USB, but no doubt about its authenticity. It opened mid-conversation. Marilyn's voice was unmistakable. That clipped diction, the smug certainty behind every word. You don't want to be the next name on my list, Rick. I've buried people in paperwork. Fine, so thick, you'd need a lawyer just to breathe. Either you pay the $5,000 adjustment fee, or I notify the compliance board and mark your deck non-compliant. Your call. Rick, a homeowner we'd later identify as one of the quietest residents in Red Hills, had been extorted into silence. But now, with my lawsuit dragging the whole rotten structure into daylight, people were starting to talk. 3 more recordings followed over the next few days, each one worse than the last. In one, Marilyn openly discussed manufacturing violations against problem homeowners who didn't donate to her pet landscaping project. In another, she talked about using her friends in the planning department to delay permit approvals for non-compliant properties. But the final nail came from a place we never expected, her own vice president, Tom Reyes, a retired school principal who'd served on the HOA board for 3 years. He walked into Cliff's office in person, handed us his phone, and said, "I can't keep lying for her. The video was grainy, but the audio clear. Taken during a closed-door HOA meeting. No homeowners, just board members. Marilyn is pacing, furious, waving what looks like a satellite image of my property. He thinks because he's outside the line, he's safe. He's not. I want that structure gone before it gets finished. I don't care if it takes a little pressure. Find me people who don't ask questions, people who make problems disappear." She laughs at her own words. Others in the room are silent. Tom fast-forwarded the video. The next segment, even worse. This Davenport guy is a cancer. If we let him win, others will follow. I want him boxed in. Legally, financially, personally. Make it so hard he'd rather sell than stay. It was conspiracy, cold, calculated, and now we had it on tape. Cliff didn't just submit the evidence to the court, he sent a copy to the county prosecutor. By the end of the week, an official criminal investigation was underway. We heard rumors of subpoenas, seized HOA computers, even an internal memo from the HOA's own insurance provider urging the board to suspend Marilyn until the matter could be internally resolved. They didn't. Of course they didn't. Instead, Marilyn doubled down. She made a statement to a local paper calling the lawsuit a media stunt by an unstable homeowner who refuses to follow community norms. She smiled in the photo, wearing a red blazer and pearl earrings, like she was preparing for a country club brunch. That photo went viral in the worst way, because alongside her statement, an anonymous online post appeared, screenshots of more emails, HOA balance sheets with unexplained retreat expenses, even a reimbursement form for a consultant who turned out to be the same man I shot in the leg. Public sentiment flipped overnight. Local news ran the story. County meetings were packed. Residents of Red Hills began organizing petitions to dissolve the current board. Some called for Marilyn's arrest. I received a handwritten letter slipped under my gate. No return name, no address. It read, "I'm sorry we let this go on so long. You're doing what we should have done years ago." It was signed with just an initial, D. By the time our court date was finalized, we didn't just have a lawsuit. We had an open criminal case, an avalanche of whistleblowers, and a community on the brink of revolt. Marilyn thought she could rule by fear. Now she was about to learn what happened when fear stopped working. The courthouse was packed. Residents from Red Hills, local reporters, county officials, even a few real estate agents who probably smelled blood in the water, all crammed into the gallery. People whispered as we walked in. Some nodded to me, subtle acknowledgments of what this had become. Not just a case about a garage, but about power and what happens when people abuse it. Marilyn sat at the defense table like royalty in exile, draped in white, not a hair out of place. Her attorney, a man with a permanent sneer and a $3,000 suit, shuffled papers with artificial calm, but I saw the cracks. Her hands trembled when she poured water. She smiled too tightly when someone in the gallery made a sarcastic cough as she entered. She was cornered, and she knew it. The judge entered and took his seat, his robe swishing like a gavel in motion. He didn't waste time. "Mr. Davenport," he said, eyes steady, "you may proceed." Cliff stood. No grandstanding, just facts. He laid it all out. The falsified documents, the unauthorized drone surveillance, the attempted trespass and sabotage, the extortion racket uncovered through audio recordings, the HOA funds funneled into private accounts. With each new piece of evidence, the courtroom fell more silent. It wasn't just damning, it was humiliating. And when the footage from Tom Reyes played, the clip of Marilyn ordering pressure, even saying she wanted me boxed in personally, there were audible gasps. Her attorney tried to object on the basis of privileged association proceedings. The judge shut him down with a flat, "Not in this courtroom." But the final blow didn't come from the evidence. It came from the county prosecutor, who stood up mid-session and requested to address the court. Unusual, but not unprecedented, not in cases with criminal overlap. "Your Honor," he began, "in light of the evidence presented in this hearing and the materials submitted to our office independently, we are issuing formal charges against Marilyn Drake for conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful use of HOA funds, criminal harassment, and attempted intimidation of a private citizen." Dead silence. Marilyn blinked once, twice, then started shaking her head slowly, as if she could physically will reality to reverse. Additionally, the prosecutor added, "We have secured warrants for the seizure of all Red Hills HOA communications over the past 18 months, and subpoenas are being delivered to each sitting board member as of this morning." The judge looked directly at her. "Mrs. Drake," he said, voice calm and deliberate, "please stand." She rose on unsteady legs. When the bailiffs approached, she started to protest, low at first, then louder, stammering about misunderstandings, lies, media conspiracies. None of it mattered. She was cuffed in front of everyone. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled. You could feel the pressure break, like a valve finally opened after years of being clamped shut. Her attorney didn't follow. He just sat down, already flipping to the back of his folder like he was ready to move on. As she was led away, she turned toward me. Her voice cracked, not with anger, but disbelief. This was my neighborhood. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The court was adjourned, but no one left right away. It felt like a funeral and a festival all at once, the end of an era and the beginning of something better. For once, justice didn't just tap the gavel. It hit the table so hard it left a mark. 3 months later, the garage was finally done. Sunlight gleamed off the steel roof as if celebrating with me. The roll-up door purred as it opened for the first time. Smooth, quiet, not a squeak out of place. Inside, everything was where it belonged. Epoxy-sealed floors, polished tool chests, a hydraulic lift in the corner already humming with life. And in the center, covered in a gray tarp with red trim, sat the Mustang, the project I'd delayed for years, waiting for the right space and the right piece. Now I had both. I installed a brass plaque beside the entry. Custom ordered, thick and unapologetic. The letters were carved deep enough to last longer than the paint on the walls. $10,000 per day. Now Marilyn pays zero SAR in federal custody. Below it, another smaller sign, simple, black and white. Private property. HOA access by court order only. And only in handcuffs. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. A reminder that I'd earned the right to finish what I started without compromise. That my land was mine not because of a loophole or a lawyer, but because I stood up when it mattered. I'd heard that the Red Hills HOA was in chaos. After the arrests and resignations, the county intervened, freezing their finances and assigning an external oversight board. Most of the members resigned in disgrace. A few were still facing civil suits from homeowners who'd been extorted or threatened under Maryland's rule. Dana, the whistleblower treasurer, was asked to help rebuild. Tom Reyes, too. They declined. "Let someone else mop up the mess," Tom told a reporter. "We did our part. The rest is healing." As for me, I got more than a garage. I got apologies, letters, cookies dropped off by neighbors I'd never even met before. One woman, a retired nurse named Judy, brought me a lemon pie and said, "Thank you for scaring her." She made my husband repaint the shed twice because it clashed with the community tone. He hated that shed, but it was his. I didn't know how to respond, so I smiled and offered her coffee. Life returned to normal. Better than normal, actually. I spent mornings in the garage with music playing, hands greasy, eyes clear. Evenings on the porch. No more drones, no strange cars idling at the curb, no letters with fake violations. Peace, at last, had a sound. It wasn't silence. It was satisfaction. The Mustang. She's coming along beautifully. Stripped down, reassembled, treated with care. A bit like this land. Like me. Last week, I hosted a small gathering. Just a few friends and neighbors, beers in hand, admiring the finished build. Someone pointed to the plaque and laughed. That's going to make her famous in the worst way. Good, I said. Let it be a warning. Because in this country, land means something. Boundaries mean something. And when someone tries to cross both without invitation, without right, they'd better be prepared for what's waiting on the other side. Especially when that someone thinks a title like HOA president means they own you. They don't. And now, everybody knows it.